Yeah, let's get this started. It's number one. It's out of 10. It's number one. It's the best. Get ready, cause it's the best thing you ever heard in your entire life. Here we go. It's gonna start any second now, so get ready. And action. Yeah, it's slide number one. It's called the Industrial Revolution in Great Britain. The Industrial Revolution started in Great Britain because of the agricultural revolution of the 18th century. Its changes in the methods of farming and stock breeding led to an increase in food production. Britain also had a ready supply of capital for investing in industrial machines. It had a large supply of minerals like coal and iron, and also Parliament provided a stable government and passed laws that protected private property. Ball? This is the growth of the cotton industry in Great Britain. The cotton industry grew due to new technological advances and became Britain's most profitable business. John Kay invented the flying shuttle, which sped up the process of weaving on a loom. James Hargreaves' spinning jenny allowed larger amounts of yarn to be produced. Richard Arkwright's water frame spinning machine and Samuel Crompton's mule increased yarn production as well. Edmund Cartwright's power loom was invented in 1787, and it allowed cloth to be woven even faster. One major source of funds for these technological advances was the Bank of England. And I just have to say, there were so many smart boys in here. There were so many smart boys. So many. All these boys I listed here are so smart. So out of ten, it's like number one in smart people right there. This one is titled The Steam Engine. James Watt was a Scottish engineer who created the steam engine in the 1760s. In 1782, he also created the rotary engine because he's such a smart boy. These two inventions led to entrepreneurs being able to spread their factories to other areas. It was used to speed up many other machines that were used to produce cotton. Later on, the steam engine was used for transportation. Boy! Well, what do you know, there's even more smart people. This one is titled Changes in Iron Creation. In the 18th century, coke was used to heat iron ore faster than charcoal. Henry Court developed the process of puddling in which coke was used to produce wrought iron. He was a really smart boy. You already know we talking about them changes in transportation though. Transportation before the Industrial Revolution was horse-based, so all these people was riding in their old nasty carriages, being pulled by all these nasty, nasty, smelly horses, and they was wondering why these horses so slow and so stanky. But eventually, railroads were built and were used to transport goods, and Richard Revithick invented the first steam-powered locomotive on a railway in southern Wales, and in 1830, George Stephenson built the rocket, which was used on the first public railway line. Both these people were very, very, very smart boys. This is the factory. The factory became the chief way to organize labor for industrial machines. Workers were paid wages to run these industrial machines, and they worked in regular hours and in shifts. Factory owners created a system of discipline in which adult workers were fined or dismissed for wrongdoings like tardiness, and children were punished through beatings. I really think this is really similar to slavery. So there was no smart boys here. None at all. No smart boys, because they all was dumb for doing this. This is the Great Exhibition. In 1851, the Great Exhibition was the first industrial fair that was held at the Crystal Palace in London. I would just wonder why would they make a palace out of crystal? Because, I mean, they could just throw a rock at the whole thing and it just come crashing down like... And all the people be like, there's glass falling all over the place, man. I don't want glass on me, man. But, It's their choice. But anyways, Great Britain in the Great Exhibition would display its wealth to the world. It also displayed Great Britain's imperial power and its role in India through the East India Company. I don't really care. They're not really. There wasn't really any smart boys here, but I guess Britain was a smart boy for doing this.
Spread of the Industrial Revolution. Some continental countries also experienced some of the necessary developments for industrial revolution in the 1770s and 1780s. These countries had toll stations and custom barriers on their roads, which increased prices of goods and made trade harder. As these countries industrialized, they did so along different lines than Britain. To the British Industrial Revolution, a major obstacle was lack of technological knowledge. However, engineers in countries that industrialized later could simply get technological knowledge from British machines and engineers. Britain actually tried to prevent this by not allowing artisans to leave the country until 1825, and not allowing the exports of British machines until 1842. Of course, both legally and illegally, the machines and artisans left Britain and gave their ideas to foreign engineers. Governments in continental industrialization played a different role than in Britain. They set tariffs on British goods to prevent them from flooding the markets and give local industries a chance to thrive. In Germany, the Zollverein was a coalition of German states put together specifically to manage such tariffs. The French were quite far behind Britain in industrialization. However, the French bank Credit Mobilier played a large role in financing many railroads and other projects throughout Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. The United States also became an industrialized country at this time. In the US, the steamboat played a role as important as the railroad did in Britain. The American system, as it came to be called, was used by American factories to maximize their production even without skilled workers. Through it, products were built that could be quickly and easily assembled. The US became a major economic power. Industrialization remained solely in Central and Western Europe and the US before 1870. Some places, like Russia, remained rural and agricultural because rulers were afraid of change. Russia's Tsarist regime did not allow for an industrial revolution until the end of the 19th century. In some parts, however, industrialization was purposely stopped by an outside force. This was the case in India. The British East India Company took control of India and began to sell Britain's manufactured textiles there. They focused on exporting India's raw materials back to Britain. This, as well as a lack of capital and the British monopoly on manufactured goods, stopped any kind of industrial revolution in India.
The social impact of industrialization on population growth. During the 19th century, the populations in the industrialized countries increased greatly. This was due to the decrease in deaths from famines, epidemics, and war. Populations also increased because of the increase of food supply in these countries, which allowed for more people to be fed than before. You know what I mean? More food means more people fed, and Britain was pretty smart for figuring that out. So yeah, they were pretty smart. It was this really smart boy. This one called the Great Famine. In Ireland, the potato was the main food source for families, and I can understand that because potatoes is really tasty. Potatoes, they taste so good, but in 1845, the potato crop was infected by a fungus that turned them black, and ew, that's just nasty. Ain't nobody gonna want to eat that. So the Great Famine caused the deaths of many Irish citizens because they was all like, ew, I ain't eating that. So they all starved, and it also led to the emigration of many of them to the United States and Britain because they don't want to be surrounded by no black potatoes. Black potatoes is nasty. Can't even eat it. They make them sick. But there wasn't no smart boys in here. They were stupid enough to only eat potatoes. Who only eats potatoes, man? You gotta have something else with it. You gotta have something. Bro, in cities, growing cities, Cities were growing and becoming places for manufacturing and industry. One city that was greatly influenced by the Industrial Revolution was Manchester. Britain had to import more food because more people were being employed in factories and less people were involved in agriculture. Eventually, the number of people involved in agriculture dropped to 20% of the population, which was lower than it ever was before. Britain's in deep trouble. I swear, Britain's in so much trouble right now. I don't know if they can make it. I don't know. Living conditions. Conditions under which people were living. In the first half of the 19th century, people had terrible living conditions. Sanitary conditions were terrible as well, which is just nasty. People ain't washing their hands or nothing. In Britain, the Poor Law Commission produced detailed reports on the living conditions of its citizens. Edwin Chadwick became the secretary of the Poor Law Commission, and after 3 years of investigation, he wrote his report on the condition of the laboring population of Great Britain. 6 years after his report, Britain's first Public Health Act created the National Board of Health. The National Board of Health would pass different pieces of legislation that attempted to change the sanitary conditions of Britain. Cholera, cholera was a deadly disease that many British citizens feared, which is just nasty. They scared this disease. Their fear of this disease caused them to follow the National Board of Health's legislation. So technically, or basically, they are so scared of this nasty, nasty disease. They are so scared of getting achoo. They are so scared of that they did whatever the National Board of Health told them to. And that's the end. Weren't really that smart because they living in a nasty place. It's pretty nasty.
Efforts of change. The industrial middle class was composed of people involved in commerce, industry, and banking, and professionals like lawyers, teachers, physicians, and government officials. They were known as the bourgeois, although they were not like the bourgeois of old. Most industrial entrepreneurs came from the middle class from a wide variety of backgrounds. The most successful ones came from a mercantile background. These entrepreneurs came to hold a large amount of wealth and were as important as the traditional planted elites. Craftsmen and artisans were the largest group of people in the cities of the Industrial Revolution. Working conditions for industrial workers were terrible. Workers had to work from 12 to 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. They could be fired at any time for even the slightest mistake, and pay was usually extremely low. Mills and coal mines were some of the worst places to work. Children and women made up a large portion of the industrial workforce. Children were particularly exploited, with pays only about one-third than that of a man, and work just as hard as a man. Pauper apprentices, orphans abandoned on the street, were used by factory workers in their factories. By 1838, children made up about 29% of the labor force. The Factory Act of 1833 limited the amount of hours children could work in factories. Women took the place of the children in factories and workshops. It was not until 1863 that excessive working hours for women were also outlawed. The Mines Act was passed in 1842, and it restricted the amount of hours children under 10 could work in a mine. The Factory Acts began to draw a separation between home and work. In this new domestic system, the man performed the main working obligations. During the Industrial Revolution, the standard of living was not very high. There was a very high amount of poor people. In an attempt to remedy this, poorhouses were established, in which the poor were kept. These poorhouses had terrible living conditions in an effort to motivate the poor to get busy and not be poor anymore. The Combination Acts of 1799 prohibited associations of workers. Trade unions were free to come together, however. These unions began to strike for better conditions. The Combination Acts were repealed as a result, and focus shifted to national unions. One of the leaders of this movement was Robert Owen. He created the Grand National Consolidated Trades Union. Unions were not the only actions taken by workers, though. The Luddites attacked the machines they believed were taking their jobs. The Chartists attempted to win political democracy for workers.
This is the end. It's over. It's done. I'm done. It's over. Goodbye.